Coming to paperback and e-readers, Isis Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Isis Dark Incubus at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. Better get the cool slow, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. New York Mayor Eric Adams says he isn't going to do anything about New York's sanctuary city laws that are creating the migrant crisis that is destroying the quality of life here in New York City. And Eric Adams says he really can't do anything about these sanctuary city laws because they were signed into law by former Mayor Bill de Blasio. And since Bill de Blasio basically signed those sanctuary city laws into place, he really can't do anything about them at all. Now, I have to call bullshit on Eric Adams and his plan to say that he won't do anything about the sanctuary city laws that have created a migrant crisis that have taken New York's quality of life back to the dark days of the 1970s and 1980s in terms of crime and the squalid conditions that are going on all throughout the city. And I call bullshit on that because the only reason that Eric Adams doesn't want to do anything about these sanctuary city laws is basically because he doesn't want to alienate any of the white politicians like Bill de Blasio, who were the ones who proposed these laws, and because he's a bootleg who basically wants to gain the favor of the other members of the Blue Party who've basically abandoned him at this point. He doesn't want to do anything about these laws because he doesn't want to try to alienate any of these further members of the Blue Party because he possibly thinks he's going to be able to get a job with the Biden administration or a higher state office. And that's the only reason why Eric Adams doesn't want to do anything to repeal these sanctuary city laws, which basically have been proven to be a complete failure. And as these laws have been proven to be a complete failure, he would rather continue to go on with failure in the hopes that he may possibly get some success as related to getting another job within the Blue Party. Now, the definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result, and that's basically what Eric Adams is trying to propose as related to continuing to maintain these sanctuary city laws, which are easy to get rid of once you understand the U.S. Constitution. Now, Bill de Blasio's sanctuary city laws have a clause that says that ICE, or Immigration's Customs and Enforcement, cannot work with the city on dealing with any sort of migrant as related to any sort of crime or any other sort of situation. And that whole clause in the sanctuary city laws basically makes the sanctuary city law completely unconstitutional because the sanctuary city law, as it's written as related to Bill de Blasio's policy, basically violates the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution. Now, the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution clearly states that federal law supersedes state and city law, and since federal law supersedes state and city law, that means that the entire clause as related to the NYPD not being able to work with ICE as related to migrants basically invalidates the entire sanctuary city law because it renders it completely unconstitutional. And it renders it unconstitutional because a federal organization such as ICE is supposed to have jurisdiction over organizations like the NYPD, and it is supposed to be able to work with the NYPD. And since the sanctuary city law impedes ICE's ability to be able to work with the federal government, that basically invalidates this law and renders it moot as related to being enforced. Because again, as related to the superiority clause of the U.S. Constitution, federal organizations and federal agencies have higher authority than those of a city ordinance, And that basically makes it where this law is completely one that cannot be enforced. However, Eric Adams basically wants to create his own policies because what the cream of wheat man wants to do is serve all of these individuals as related to their backwards policies in the hopes that he may possibly again go out here and get a job with an appointment possibly to the Biden administration, or Kathy Hochul may possibly hope to appoint him to some other position in her state government. And because the cream of wheat man basically wants to create this covert contract, he wants to arbitrarily enforce the law as related to federal laws. And this is the same approach to policy that he had as related to his vaccine mandate that he kept in place while the entire world basically had walked away from these policies. Again, hoping that by he would be able to virtue signal and get brownie points. And the same thing is being done here with this migrant crisis. He is basically taking a crisis, hoping to go out here and get brownie points by enforcing laws that are clearly ones that are unconstitutional. And like the vaccine mandate, where the Supreme Court already told the United States president that this law was unconstitutional as related to work, Eric Adams kept that policy in place the same way he's keeping the sanctuary city laws in place, basically making it where the city of New York is basically being run like a fiefdom instead of being a part of a government that's supposed to be following a constitution. Because under our United States Constitution, again, federal law is supposed to be the one that is sovereign because we're supposed to be under the rule of law. Unfortunately, under Eric Adams, a former police officer, he doesn't really understand the enforcement of laws, and that's what makes him grossly unqualified to be a person running the executive branch. Because anybody who runs the executive branch, whether it be of a city, a state, or a country, like the United States, has to understand about the hierarchies of law and have to understand about the supremacy clauses of law, because like state is supposed to supersede city and federal is supposed to supersede state and city, this means that the federal law is the one that takes priority. And when it comes to migrants, it's supposed to be the federal government who is supposed to take jurisdiction over migrants. And they're supposed to take jurisdiction over migrants because their job is to take responsibility for those who enter the country illegally, and their job is to take responsibility for those who enter the country illegally because it's their job to make sure that these individuals are vetted and checked to make sure that these individuals don't have criminal backgrounds or criminal records or have mental health issues or a clear and present danger to us like terrorists who are part of terror cells. But that doesn't mean anything to Eric Adams because a bootleg basically wants to go out here and get brownie points from their white slave masters, and Eric Adams basically wants to go out here and try to go out here and virtue signal to show how he's going to spite Donald Trump in order to get favor with those white slave masters in the blue party, not understanding that he basically is making himself appear to be like an imbecile, because if you cannot understand basic concepts like law, then you have no real place in government. And that really, again, is a clear and present danger to the safety of all New Yorkers to have a grossly unqualified individual in the executive branch. And having this grossly unqualified individual like Eric Adams, who's following after Bill de Blasio, and is only following after him because he sees a white man who he doesn't want to go out here and upset the apple cart by showing that he is more intelligent than he is. What he wants to do is say that this white man is right because he said so, but this white man was wrong from minute one when he created these sanctuary city laws that clearly violate our U.S. Constitution. Because our U.S. Constitution, again, clearly states that there is a supremacy clause, and again, according to that supremacy clause, ICE has complete jurisdiction over migrants. ICE has complete control over migrants, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement's job is to deal with migrants, similar to the way we had Ellis Island here in New York to deal with migrants. Ellis Island's job was to do the federal government's job of being able to deal with taking care of the health of migrants who immigrated to this country, making sure that this person had something to offer in terms of education and skills that would improve the quality of life of people if they came to America, and make sure that these people were not criminals and fugitives looking to flee the country. That was the job that was done at Ellis Island, and when this country started to become a nation of immigrants, and that was the job of ICE. But many of these people who are on the left, they wanted to say that that job was racist, but that job was essential in maintaining the safety and quality of life of New Yorkers, which has basically been put at risk, and been put at risk by a mayor who refuses to go out and demand that his lawyers repeal this law, because his lawyers can go and repeal this law and demand that it be repealed, because this law is unconstitutional. Now, when I say lawyers, they could go out here and appeal to the courts to get this law overturned, because it's clear that this law violates the federal constitution. And again, the mayor could do that with his lawyers, but that would mean admitting that the Blue Party basically failed as related to the sanctuary city laws, as related to creating laws. And that would basically show the incompetence of the Blue Party, and it would mean a clear case of accountability. But instead of looking to take that L, what Eric Adams wants to do is continue to proudly and ignorantly continue to follow behind Bill de Blasio, not wanting to admit that this white man was wrong. And that's what makes this black man pathetic, because he would rather go out here and continue to bootlick an idiot black white man, and continue to bootlick an idiot white man who is out of office, and his policies clearly are a failure. He would rather hide behind white failure rather than try to present an example of black excellence, and wants to continue maintaining these sanctuary city laws basically out of ignorance and stupidity. I would even dare to say stupidity, because you clearly see that this law is a failure. You clearly see that this policy just doesn't work. But the whole thing is the party is too proud to admit that it's wrong, and that's a sad flaw as related to a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans just never want to admit when they're wrong. They never want to admit when something doesn't work, and usually people have to suffer for years, just like Americans did with Prohibition. Americans suffered for years under Prohibition as organized crime got more and more economic and political power before Americans admitted they were wrong and really admitted that they needed to repeal these prohibition laws, because they were turning America's cities into war zones. That's why they had to admit that, but sadly, Americans, it takes them years to concede that they've made mistakes, and sadly, this is what's happening here with Eric Adams as related to this entire migrant crisis. He doesn't want to admit that this whole policy is a failure, and the whole thing is he wants to sit there and say he can't do anything about it, when it's very simple to do something about it. One, you can sit there and go and have the city's lawyers appeal to get this law overturned as related to this federal supremacy clause, and you can easily get the city council to repeal this policy and admit failure. But they don't want to admit failure because they fear losing the next election, even though they may possibly wind up losing the election if the quality of life in New York continues to get worse and there are more incidents of migrants attacking police officers and terrorizing neighborhoods and terrorizing people. They may wind up losing the election, and again, may wind up losing the election because they are too proud to admit when they're wrong. And again, when it comes to the whole concept of a sanctuary city, it is not the job of a local city to provide sanctuary to those who enter the country illegally, because that violates the boundaries of our federal borders. And again, if you can violate a federal border and are enabled to violate a federal border, then you can go into a city and believe you don't have to go out here and follow the laws of the local ordinances, and you don't believe you have to follow the local ordinances because you already felt like you could already get past the federal laws. And this is the thing that flies over the head of Eric Adams, a former police officer. He doesn't understand about how borders are boundaries, and if you have to follow the federal laws, then you're going to obey the state and city laws. And when you go out and enable migrants who entered the country illegally to break federal law, they believe it's okay to break state and city laws as well. These are the dots that are not connected by Eric Adams, who continues to make excuses by saying, oh, we can't repeal the sanctuary city law, when the solution stares them in the face. And as the solution stares them in the face, they don't want to look at that solution because they don't want to solve the problem. They believe that they can create a covert contract with Kathy Hochul and the state to give them funding and the Biden administration to give them money. But those covert contracts will not be fulfilled, and those covert contracts will not be fulfilled because all they're going to do is basically nobody wants to give more money to migrants because they don't want to lose elections. And as New York City's tax base continues to erode due to deficits, you have Eric Adams going out here believing he can create a fantasy land where everything is going to be okay, but it's not going to be okay because what's going to happen is the city's budget is basically going to wind up imploding because you're going to have more costs for taking care of migrants than actual tax revenue, and congestion pricing ain't going to get you out of this, and raising taxes won't get you out of this. No, the only way out of this is to admit that this Bill de Blasio sanctuary city law was a complete disaster. That is the only way out of this situation. And it's the only way to deal with this migrant crisis, because this crisis is one that is self-inflicted by proud politicians who want to try to say that they are better than Donald Trump. And as they're in their feelings about being better than Donald Trump, what they are showing how incompetent they are and how their policies aren't better than Donald Trump's, because you're basically proving Donald Trump's points about the border. You're proving Donald Trump's points about why we need ICE and federal vetting, why we need ICE and enforcement, because if you cannot enforce your federal laws, then the people who go out here and migrate to your country, or as I see it, invade your country, feel like they don't have to regard your state and city laws, and that's why you're seeing this chaos in the streets, because there's no boundary set. And with there being no boundary set, what you're going to get is more chaos in these cities. And the only way out of that chaos, I believe, is to go out here and deal with guys like Eric Adams by voting them out of office and making sure you vote a candidate in who will go out here and maintain national sovereignty and maintain national security, because a secure border is all about national security. And this is something that, again, shows me why Eric Adams isn't fit for office, because if you sit there and say you cannot go out here and defend the U.S. Constitution, then you are not fit to be in any political office, because a politician's job as related to taking the oath of office is to say that you're going to defend the U.S. Constitution, and the sanctuary city laws clearly do not defend our U.S. Constitution, and that is a violation of your oath that you took when you took this office, and that basically is another reason why Eric Adams should be disqualified from being the mayor of New York or kicked out of office, because if you cannot maintain your oath of office to defend our U.S. Constitution, then you are not fit to be in any political office in this country. Now, if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find the books of the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my vampire novel Eternal Night, my business novel Recipe for Success. You can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you'd like to see me make more videos about the migrant crisis, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati on Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. The man who rules the world runs into the irresistible force of a man with nothing to lose in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get the regular and variant editions of John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose on Amazon.com today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.